All right, we are in 1 Samuel chapter 9. We're going to begin picking up our thoughts there. Saul has been searching for his father's lost donkeys. He takes a servant with him to try to find them. They make a circular path. I have a map for you in your handout where you can sort of follow the course they likely took. They end up pretty close to home again, but the servant is suggesting one more stop. They're going to go to Ramah. They're going to try to find a prophet. Once upon a time in the past, prophets were known by another term. What else were they known by? Seers. So chapter 9, verse 9, formerly, the ones that in this reading we know of as a prophet, formerly they were called a seer. And so they go to Ramah. They're going to encounter Samuel. Saul has never met him before. Samuel's never met Saul before. And God is orchestrating the events here. He has told Samuel that Saul is going to be coming, to expect him on the next day. And this is the day when they enter the city. They come upon some women who are going out to draw water. And they ask about the seer, they ask about the prophet, and they direct them the right way. And they're going to encounter Samuel and strike up a conversation. Verse 18, then Saul approached Samuel in the gate and said, "Please tell me where the seer's house is." And Samuel answered Saul and said, "I am the seer." So they meet him in the gate. And I thought about that as I read that verse. That would be an interesting series, either in sermon form or Bible class form, about the gateways of the Bible. There are so many things that happen in the gates in the Bible, Old Testament and New. And if you'll just put your mind to that for a little bit, you'll begin thinking of passages where things occur in the gates of a certain city. And those become important places in the Bible with lessons belonging to them. So maybe we'll do that sometime in the future. No promises, because I tend to forget those thoughts. They come and go, and I might remember it someday, and we'll develop a series on that. So they meet him in the gate, and then in verse 19, Samuel answered Saul and said, "I am the seer. Go up before me to the high place, for you shall eat with me today, and in the morning I will let you go and will tell you all that is on your mind." So on the mind of Saul has been, where's those donkeys? And Samuel tells him, "Come with me. You're going to eat at this feast that I have prepared, and after that you're going to spend the night with me, and then on the next day I'm going to send you out, and I'm going to tell you everything that's been on your mind. By the way," verse 20, "as for your donkeys, which were lost 3 days, do not set your mind on them." They've been found. Don't worry about them. Don't be thinking about them. Don't let that be on your mind anymore. I'm going to tell you all that's on your mind, and that's not it. I'm going to remove that from your mind. And then he plants a new thought in the mind of Saul, and he's going to think about it during the feast. He's going to think about it all night. And in the morning, before he leaves that town, Samuel's going to tell him all that is on his mind about this new thought that he's going to plant. So let's get this thing off the mind, plant this seed for a new thought. The end of verse 20, "And for whom is all that is desirable in Israel? Is it not for you and for all your father's household?" That's the new thought he plants. There's something big that's going to happen. It's going to involve you and the nation of Israel, and God is putting you in a position. And so Samuel tells him, here's the thing I want you to be thinking about. And he's going to be thinking about it and wondering about that all night long. Verses 22 through 24. Then Samuel took Saul and his servant and brought them into the hall and gave them a place at the head. That's such a strange thing. If you think about it, it's such an odd thing because Saul and his servant are Johnny-come-latelys. They have just wandered into town at the last minute. Here's a feast that's been prepared, and they're given a seat at the head of the table as though it's in their honor. That's strange. To invite them to eat is enough of an honor, but to place them at the head of the table is so unusual, and this begins to germinate that thought that Samuel has planted in his mind. So he gives them a place at the head of those who were invited, who were about 30 men. And Samuel said to the cook, "Bring the portion that I gave you, concerning which I said to you, set it aside." Then the cook took up the leg with what was on it and set it before Saul. And Samuel said, "Here is what has been reserved. Set it before you and eat, because it has been kept for you until the appointed time, since I said, I have invited the people." So Saul ate with Samuel that day. I'm going to put you at the head of the table. Calls out to the kitchen. "Remember, I told you to set that portion aside? I want you to bring that out now. It's for this guest. And by the way, this leg portion, which is a prime portion to give, this leg portion has been set aside for you, Saul. It's been set aside for you since the day I invited people to this feast." What would be going through your mind if you were Saul? How is all of this possible? How can it be? He didn't know I was coming. He didn't know. How did he know all these things? Telling me my father's donkeys have been found? I didn't tell him about that, but he knew about it. Invites me to this meal, sets me at the head of the table, brings out something that's been reserved for me, and I just happened into town? So Saul is beginning to think about all of those things. Now he's going to spend the night. It's becoming clear this whole feast, the whole thing, is for the sake of Saul. And the two men have never met, but God told Samuel he's coming. And this is the one who will be prince over my people. This is the one that's going to become a ruler over my people. You're going to anoint him, and he's coming the next day, and I'll point him out to you, and God did all of that. But Saul knows nothing of it yet. Brand new idea. Now, verses 25 through 27. Is that right? Yes. So Saul ate with Samuel that day. When they came down from the high place into the city, Samuel spoke with Saul on the roof. So it appears as though they have left the feast. Feast is over, and he goes home with Samuel to spend the night, and they're visiting with each other on the roof. You know, all my life, when we've had company over, I've never invited anybody up to the roof. And there's a reason for that, isn't there? So we're being introduced to a little bit of a cultural difference. Flat roofs, cooler in the weather that was there, more comfortable place, and you find another series of lessons. Rooftops in the Bible. A lot of interesting things happen on rooftops in the Bible, and that would be another good series to investigate sometime. So here they are on the roof, cooler in the day, flat roof. They're visiting there, and verse 26, they arose early, and at daybreak Samuel called to Saul on the roof, saying, "Get up, that I may send you away." If you ever have a teenager who has trouble getting up in the morning and going to school, you might embroider this and put it in a little frame in their room. "Get up, that I may send you away." And So he's calling to him. Evidently, Saul is on the roof all night, and Samuel is elsewhere in the house, and he calls up to him on the roof in the morning to get him to rise up. He wants to send him on his way, not to get rid of him, but to help him on his way and to impart to him that information he told him about. When you leave the next day, I'm going to tell you all that's on your mind. So get up now. It's morning time. I want you to get up so I can send you on your way with that information. And the thought continues to germinate in his mind. So they do that. Saul rose. Both he and Samuel went out into the street. Verse 27, as they were going down to the edge of the city, Samuel said to Saul, "Say to the servant that he may go ahead of us and pass on. But you remain standing now, that I may proclaim the word of God to you." I want to send you on your way the next morning, tell you all that's on your mind. And this is not from my mind, this is the Word of God. I'm going to tell you all that's on your mind, not from my own source of knowledge, but from the source of knowledge that God has granted to me. I'm going to send you on your way with the Word of God. Send the servant out ahead. This is for you alone. So he is preparing Saul. Remember who Saul is. Son of Kish, tribe of Benjamin, on a common errand, searching for donkeys. Nothing spectacular has ever happened in his life. He's made no preparation for this. He's going to be filling a position of the first king of the nation of Israel, a position that has never been filled by anybody else except God Himself. He's got no preparation for any of this. And so Samuel is preparing him personally, privately, to fill this role. It's not for the ears of the servants yet. It's not to be made public yet. And so he sends the servant on ahead. You have questions, comments, or ideas? Anything before we look at the next verses? Yes. Yeah. The application to us today, sometimes maybe the things that we don't think important, maybe we should take to God. And maybe there's something greater in the will of God than our small concern by comparison. Sometimes we occupy ourselves, we get blinders on these little errands we go on, about things that are not as significant as the will of God itself. And if we will stop, pause, consider God in the process, maybe we'll see something even more important than what we're seeking after originally. Keep our spiritual eyes open. So there's something there for us to think about in our common errands and things we're so busy and occupied with in this world. Maybe if we just stop and pray to God about some things, maybe we'll not only take care of that issue, but see a new thought in the will of God come into focus and always be about the Father's business. Good thoughts. Anything else? Okay. Good question, Debbie. Back in the book of Judges, when you're about Judges chapter 19, 20, 21, right around in there, where someone from the tribe of Benjamin, Gibeah in particular, which is Saul's hometown, where he abused a concubine and she died, and the rest of the tribes gang up on them and basically wiped them out. There's only a few hundred left. And so they have grown from that point. But Debbie's question is, where was Saul in that timeline? Back in the book of Judges, where was he in that timeline? I've not even thought about that question. That means I'm not going to have a really good answer for you on the spot. I need some time to think about that timeline, and I don't know if there's enough clues there. I think that, as I recall, when we studied the book of Judges about that issue with the tribe of Benjamin, that chronologically that was out of place in the book of Judges, if I remember right. So, considering that, I'm kind of thinking Saul may not have been anywhere around at that point. I'm not sure he was on the history map at that point. Because I think, and I may be wrong about that, but I think chronologically that was out of place in the book of Judges. And you go from the book of Judges, you have to get through Eli and Samuel and into Saul. I'm guessing Saul wasn't around yet. But that would be my best guess at this point. That tribe, though, has flourished enough, grown enough, that he's from a prominent, at least his father is listed as someone significant in Benjamin. And donkeys were quite a value. Animals, that's one of the ways they measured wealth back then. And so they've grown some. But that's one of the curiosities that Saul has about all of this. I'm from the tribe of Benjamin. I'm one of the least ones around. And, you know, my father's house, though he's regarded as an honorable man, a good man, I'm a nobody. Who am I that you're talking to me like this? So they've grown back enough that he can be described the way he is as we begin studying about him in chapter 9, but he is from a tribe that is really diminished in the nation of Israel. Yes, Greg? Yeah, Greg is referencing back to the book of Daniel as he had conversation with Nebuchadnezzar and how God puts people in places of authority, whether it be a king or any other kind of a ruler. God raises up and he brings low, and God is in ultimate control of things. And in this case, he had a purpose in choosing Saul. Remember, the people have requested a king to be like the nations around them, and God picks out the guy that is head and shoulders above everybody else and says, there you go, and everybody's going to end up saying, long live the king, and they're thrilled they have this guy who has all the stature of that. God's doing all of that for a reason, to teach them a lesson, that it's not in the appearance that the world has an image of success, of power, of everything that is desirable, and it's not what the world thinks it is. There's a reason he picked Saul, and he's teaching a lesson with that. Keep that in the background of your mind as we go through this. All right, we're going to continue now looking into chapter 10. And we are in verses, let's start with verse 1. Samuel's preparing Saul for this public coronation, but now there's a more private teaching moment. Then Samuel took the flask of oil, poured it on his head, and kissed him, and said, Has not the Lord anointed you a ruler over his inheritance? Chapter 9, verse 16, you'll find the word, at least in the New American Standard, prince. The word prince back in chapter 9, verse 16, and ruler in chapter 10, verse 1 are from the same word in the original language. In the Hebrew, it's the same word. Ruler, prince, this is the one who's going to be over my people. And by saying he's going to be a ruler, he's going to be a prince, we understand it's a stewardship position. God is the ultimate authority, and he's putting him in that position. So imagine your reaction. You've come from a very common, ordinary, lowly station in life. You haven't gone to school for this. You've not even seen it done before among God's people. It's a brand new position. You don't know the etiquette. You don't know the rules, how to function in that capacity. You've never been in this kind of leadership. You've been looking for lost donkeys. Now you're going to be ruler over a nation of people. He'd never met Samuel before. He's not quite sure of this whole thing. It's going to take some convincing. And that's why Samuel is sending the servant out ahead. First, he has to convince Saul. So here is a private coronation. The pouring out of the oil, anointing of him, and announcing to him what this is all about. I'm going to tell you everything that's on your mind. You've been wondering what all this is about? This is it. And then he has this private moment with him. Now let's look at chapter 10. Continue reading from verse 1 all the way down through verse 13. Then Samuel took the flask of oil, poured it on his head, kissed him, and said, Has not the Lord anointed you a ruler over his inheritance? Now I want you to notice something. Verse 2. When you go from me today, something's going to happen. Then go down to verse 3. Then you will go on further. This is point number 2. Something else is going to take place. Then go down to verse 5. Afterward. 1, 2, 3. Listen, I'm going to do 3 things to convince you, to persuade you. This is God's will. It is ordained by God. He's in charge of this. God is the one orchestrating this. 3 things are going to happen to you, and they are meant to convince Saul in a way that he had never been convinced or thought before. So, verse 2, when you go from me today, then you will find 2 men. How many? 2. Where? Close to Rachel's tomb in the territory of Benjamin at Zelzah. Where in particular? Zelzah. And they will say to you, here's what they're going to say, quote, unquote, the donkeys which you went to look for have been found. Now behold, your father has ceased to be concerned about the donkeys and is anxious for you, saying, what shall I do about my son? There's your unquote. You'll watch movies today, and there are secret people going to meet other secret people. They've not met each other yet. They don't know who they are. It's in a world of spies and espionage and things like that. And so you go with a code word or a code phrase. And you'll say this or they'll say that, and by those words you will know. And so, number 1, he tells him, you're going to find 2 men near Rachel's tomb, at Zelzah in particular, and here's what they're going to say. This is going to identify something for Saul. Then verse 3, you will go on further from there, and you'll come as far as the oak of Tabor. And there 3 men are going up to God at Bethel. So you're going here, they're going there. This time it's not 2 men, it's going to be 3 men. And then he tells them here's the direction they're going to be traveling, and here's the location they're traveling to. They're going up to God at Bethel. They'll meet you, one carrying 3 young goats. What's the chances? 3 guys. First one's going to be carrying 3 young goats, another carrying 3 loaves of bread, and another carrying a jug of wine. And they will greet you and give you 2 loaves of bread, which you will accept from their hand. Point number 3, verse 5. Afterward, you will come to the hill of God, where the Philistine garrison is. And it shall be as soon as you've come there to the city that you'll meet a group of prophets. First you meet 2 men, then you meet 3 men. This is what the 2 men will say. This is what the 3 men will be carrying. This is where they'll be going. This is what they'll give you. Afterward, you'll come to the hill of God. There's the Philistine garrison. You're going to meet a group of prophets coming down from the high place with harp, tambourine, flute, and a lyre before them. And they will be prophesying. Then the Spirit of the Lord will come upon you mightily, and you shall prophesy with them and be changed into another man. I'd like you to think about that. Just think about it right now. You will be changed into another man. It shall be when these signs come to you, do for yourself what the occasion requires, for God is with you, and you shall go down before me to Gilgal. And behold, I will come down to you to offer burnt offerings and sacrifice peace offerings. And you shall wait 7 days until I come to you and show you what you should do. This is going to happen. That's going to happen. Then this third thing's going to happen. Then you go here. Then you wait. You will begin to understand God is doing all of this. You wait for me 7 days. I'm going to come down to offer a burnt offering, and there I will tell you what you should do. You won't know what you're supposed to do until that happens. So if you don't know what you're supposed to do, what should you do? Wait. Wait until you know what you're doing. Wait until you understand. That's going to come into play later. Right now, we just park verse 8 in the back of our mind, and that's going to come into play later. But he's convincing Saul, God's in charge, God's communicating with you through me. Here's the proof. These 3 things are going to happen. Then you go here, then you wait, then I'll come, and then I'll tell you. Verse 9. It happened when he turned his back to leave Samuel, God changed his heart. How did God change his heart? How was he changed into another man? Those lines are connected. He's going to be changed into another man. God's going to change his heart. How would he accomplish that? And all those signs came about on that day. When they came to the hill there, behold, a group of prophets met him. The Spirit of God came upon him mightily, so that he prophesied among them. It came about when all who knew him previously saw that he prophesied, now with the prophets, that the people said to one another, what has happened to the son of Kish? Is Saul also among the prophets? He'll be changed into another man. God changed his heart. How? All these signs came into play. All these things happened. He comes up to the prophets. He begins prophesying. He's not like he was. He begins prophesying. What's happened? What's changed? With Saul the son of Kish. He's different. He's different in prophesying, and he's different in understanding all that has been on his mind. He's beginning to perceive God's will and that God is behind all of these things. He is changing. He is being convinced. His heart is changed. His demeanor has changed. God is working through him in ways that he has never done before. There's a change in that way. Verse 12, a man there said, "Now who is their father?" Therefore it became a proverb, "Is Saul also among the prophets?" When he'd finished prophesying, he came to the high place. So he's going to convince him. Samuel's going to convince him. In verse 7, he said, this is going to happen. You're going to meet 2 men. You're going to meet 3 men. You're going to meet a group of prophets. In verse 7, those things are called signs. In verse 7, does anybody have anything besides the word signs in a translation you have? It shall be when these signs come to you. Anybody have a word besides signs? I wasn't sure about that. I forgot to check multiple translations with that. These things are signs. What are signs for? Signs are for more than the sign itself. A sign exists to point to something else. A sign is there to point you to something more important. If you see a sign, it's telling you, it's pointing you to something else. In the book of John, you'll find the word signs used of the miracles that Jesus performed. They were about his identity. They were about his authority. Those 3 happenings, those 3 events were signs. And they were meant to convince him about that thought that Samuel planted on his mind. They are for the main part, all except for the prophesying. For the main part, those signs were common events. You're going to meet 2 guys. You're going to meet 3 guys. You're going to meet this group. They're going to give you this. They're going to say that. They're common, ordinary things that become supernatural things because they've been foretold. And they serve the purpose of signs. So we have those 3 that we've considered. Any comments or questions through that reading and discussion? All right, Saul's changing. He's being convinced. He's still a little uncertain of a lot of things, but he's being convinced. Now, verses 11 through 13, it came about when all who knew him previously saw that he prophesied now with the prophets, that the people said to one another, "What's happened to the son of Kish? Is Saul also among the prophets?" Who's their father? These prophets. Who's their father? That was a curious line to me. Like, you wouldn't expect it from somebody that you knew. Or, we do know them. We know who their fathers are. And they're hometown boys. You just wouldn't expect it. When Jesus was in his ministry, they questioned about, isn't his father Joseph? You know, the carpenter and his mother, are they not with us? Don't we know who they are? Isn't this just a hometown boy? Isn't this somebody we've just grown up with and known? And they didn't want to pay any attention to Jesus. How could he be doing all these things? And I wonder if that's sort of the background of that question. Who is their father? So it becomes a proverb. Is Saul also among the prophets? So God is willing to work with him, is working with him in a way that he's never done it before, and the people are wondering what's happened to him. Prophets had to be somebody's son. They had to come from somewhere. The other prophets were hometown boys from somewhere. 1 Samuel 10 and verse 8 is going to come into play up in chapter 13, where he's supposed to wait for Samuel to come and offer the burnt offering. So we have a little bit of work to do before we get 3 or 4 chapters up there and read about that. Here's something I'd like you to think about. How is God's will confirmed today? And we've talked about this kind of thing several times. Back then, in this day that we're reading about, in Saul's time, I'm going to foretell these things. There's something that is going to be of such a nature, such a miraculous kind, that it can only be of God, and that's going to confirm this to you. But how does God confirm His will today? And the answer I want you to have, and I hope you have, is through the Bible itself, through Scripture. That's how God confirms His will. 1 John 5:13, you can know that you're saved by the things that are written. That's how you know things today. You shall know the truth, and the truth shall make you free. Sanctify them by your truth. Your word is truth. So that's how God sets us apart. That's how God confirms things. That's how we know it is the will of God. We can't just guess at something. We can't just feel it strongly and say it is. We have to find it in the Bible. And that's how God confirms things to us today. So think about that difference from then until now. Don't just read into a series of happenings. Oh, I'm sure this is God. God did all of this. Don't read into that. There's a certain amount of guesswork in those kinds of things. You can say perhaps, you can say maybe, but the only thing you can know for sure is what you find in book, chapter, and verse. That's how God confirms today. Next question. Where do leaders come from in the Lord's church today? Where do they come from? They have to come from somewhere. They have to be somebody's child. They have to be a hometown boy or girl from somewhere. Where do they come from? And I want you to think about Saul's surprise. Who am I in my father's house? From the least of the tribes of the nation of Israel. Why are you singling me out for this? How could this even be possible? Think about the surprise of Saul. Think about your surprise. Because it could be you. You could be the person God's looking for to fill a certain role. Well, surely not me. Who am I? I'm the least of. I don't feel qualified. I don't feel like I should be the one. If you look at Isaiah, you look at Jeremiah, you look at Ezekiel, none of them felt qualified for the role they were going to fill. But God chose them. God cleansed them. God set them apart. Jeremiah didn't want to do it because he said, I'm a youth. What do I know? Where do leaders come from in the church today? Who's going to be the next preacher? Who's going to be another elder? Who's going to be a deacon? Who's going to teach a Bible class? Who's going to coordinate something and teach something for a ladies' class? Who's supposed to be the ones that are teaching the young girls? Where do the leaders in God's church come from? They come from somewhere. And most of us will be surprised if someone points to us and says, I need you to fill this role. You're being called upon to serve in this way. And you might not feel like you're able to do that. Maybe there's a little bit of want to that's missing. When they finally, publicly, pinpoint Saul as the next king, where is he? Was he standing in the front of the line? Was he standing up there in front of everybody, ready to go? Give me the crown. Let's get this thing rolling. Where was he? Hiding among the baggage. How big was he? Head and shoulders above everybody. When he was hiding among the baggage, I'll guarantee you he wasn't standing up straight. He was hiding among the baggage. It finally narrowed down, and God chose Saul, and he wasn't even there where they could find him. They had to go search him out, hiding among the baggage. He was that uncertain about filling this role that God had chosen him to fill. Where do leaders come from? What could you be doing that you're not doing now? What could you be preparing yourself to do that you have not been preparing yourself to do? Willing to just sit in the background and let somebody else fill that role. What could you be doing different today? You know what struck me this morning when I got up? I'm like you. You're going to fill out your card this morning for attendance. You have to put a date up at the top of that. Or maybe you wrote out your check for the contribution this morning. You had to put a date on that. What's the date today? April 2. January, February, March, April. You have a third of the year that's gone. What have you done so far this year? What have you done differently? What have you done in an equipping way for yourself to serve God in greater ways? Where have you set your goal? What target do you have? How are you growing in Christ, and what will you do with it? Where do leaders come from? If years just come and go and pass you by and you're not making progress in those kinds of things, a leader can't come from you. But God may want you in that position, need you in that position. You could be filling that position. They come from somewhere, and most often they are surprised when they are called upon for the first time to think that it could be them. And most will feel ill-equipped and uncertain venturing into it and would like to hide in the pews. Think about what role you could fill or be preparing yourself to fill, and you may be next in line or down the line to serve in some good way in the Lord's will. I hope that encourages you this morning. We will pause in our study now and dismiss class. Thank you for your good attention.